A profile for Christian maturity. Leaders who are appointed to serve in shepherding roles in the church are to be selected based on comprehensive biblical criteria for measuring Christian maturity. Here's Gene to explain this principle.
Paul now begins to address a very practical solution. Because there were men not only who had joined in the eldership from the time that Paul met them there in Miletus, warned them about those that would get in and emerge from within and lead people astray, but there were other men that were emerging who wanted to become a part of the eldership. And so this is what Paul said. Timothy, this saying is trustworthy. If anyone, and he leaves the door open for any man who's mature, literally it could be translated, any man, aspires to be an overseer or an elder or a pastor or a shepherd, he desires a noble task. And then Paul enumerates what Timothy should look for in a spiritual leader. Now, one of the things that I think we need to understand here is that this is not just a profile for those of us who are spiritual leaders. In fact, this is a profile for Christian maturity of all men, and even all women, even though he's talking about men here. Later he'll talk about women when he gets to deacons. But here he's talking about men. He's talking about maturity. With the exception of two of these qualities, these are restated for women. This is a profile of Christian maturity. And what he's saying is, Timothy, of all people, those who are in eldership should be mature. And here's what a mature person is like: above reproach, which is a man with a good reputation. The husband of one wife, which really means morally pure. One woman in your life, your wife. Self-control, that's balanced in words and action, a fabulous concept of maturity. Sensible, which really means wise and humble. Respectable, which is being a good role model. The Greek word there for respectable is kosmios, which is really the word from which we get our English word cosmetics, which means our lives are to be like cosmetics to the gospel. We're to make the gospel look good. That's what it means to be respectable. One place it's translated, cosmeo is the verb to adorn, where our lives are to adorn the gospel. Like cosmetics make us attractive, so our lives would be lived in such a way that we make the gospel attractive. Hospitable, which really has to do with being unselfish and being generous. He goes on, able teacher or apt to teach or able to teach, which is really a capacity to communicate sensitively. It's not a skill per se, but it has to do with being non-argumentative and non-defensive and sensitive and to listen and to speak gently. It's a character quality. If you look at 2 Timothy, you have a reference to that. Not addicted to wine, shouldn't be addicted to any kind of substances. Not a bully, certainly, which means abusive. Gentle, that's a contrast. Sensitive, loving, kind. Not quarrelsome, that is not argumentative, not divisive. And of course, that was what was going on in this eldership there in Ephesus. They were angry at each other and quarreling, and not all of them, but I think that what Paul was trying to do was for those who were not this way, to support Timothy in the process of dealing with those who are not living for Christ. Not greedy. One of the major purposes and motives of false teachers was money. Materialism, which was sad. One who manages his own household competently. A good husband, a good father. Not a new convert. Not someone who's just professed Christ. A seasoned Christian. And Paul says, if you don't follow that, you can set a person up to be tempted by Satan in a serious fall of pride and arrogance. And finally, he said, he should even have a good reputation among outsiders, that is, unbelievers. A good witness in the community at large. And so Paul outlines here for Timothy in the context of the situation that he's facing with dealing with not only men who are in the leadership role, who shouldn't be, but men who want to get into the leadership role. And here's how to have a criteria by which to measure whether or not they are qualified and mature. And that leads to a question. In view of this specific biblical criteria for selecting elders and overseers, what practical way can we implement this important principle? The fact of the matter is, Paul does not give us the methodology. He simply says, you discover people who have these qualities. And that's a process that I've seen evolve in my own ministry over the years, where you develop a process by which you can really test people. This is not perfection, obviously, but there is a process that you can develop. And one of the very important factors in the ministry that I've had over the years that we've developed is within our small group ministry that a man and his wife who serve effectively as a small group leader for a period of time and have the respect of that small group, have been very faithful, have served, been committed to those people. Those people have been ministered to. They've proved their marriage over the process of time. Becomes a very important criteria or setting by which we apply this criteria. So there are many, many creative ways in which that can be applied.